Well, thank you. Yeah, I just had a dog barking. Hopefully she'll be quiet. But yeah, my name is Jenny Holmes, and I work with the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance as a West Coast organizer based out of Portland, Oregon. And this year I've added California to my portfolio of states that I support to help activists get involved and to create more interest in protecting Utah's red rock wilderness. And this year we've had the continuing challenge of the past 2.5 years of trying to reach out to our members of Congress during COVID. And so we've been doing a lot online, including doing a lot of meetings with members of Congress by Zoom, and hope to do one perhaps with you. Looks like I got muted there for a second. So anyway, I'm back on. So as I was saying, it'd be great to meet with your member of Congress by Zoom, because she is I think for most of you, Doris Matsu is a co-sponsor of America's Red Rock Wilderness Act, which is one of what I'm going to talk about tonight. And in the context of how we can protect bird life and biodiversity, protect the climate by keeping Utah wild. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And I want to thank you all again for the opportunity to be with you. There we go. Okay. Everyone see that okay? It's working, great. Yeah, so what I have here are the historic lands of the tribes of the land areas that we are trying to protect. We acknowledge the longstanding relationships, history of the native peoples of the Colorado Plateau with these lands, and the tribes are roughly the Shoshone, Gashute, Ute, and Paiute, and also the Hopi and Pueblo have historic ties to places like Bears Ears National Monument. Let's see, I'm going to stop right now. And I have the wrong slideshow because it doesn't have my canyon wren. Sorry about that. I'm going to get out of screen share. It put me into a beta version. I'm going back to basics. There we go. They keep changing Zoom and there's different ways to do things, and sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. There we go. Okay, so keeping Utah wild for birds, biodiversity, and the climate. I would like someone to share what they think this little bird is. I know you're all really good at identifying birds. This one is very common in the Southwest. It is kind of the voice of the canyonlands of Southwest Utah. Any guesses? You can put it in the chat if you'd like. I'll give you just a minute here. A couple seconds rather. So I'm not seeing any guesses yet. But this is, oh, there we go. There we go. Canyonland. I mean, a canyon wren. So thank you. See, Marby got it. So this area, although it is might seem far away, is very important globally in a lot of different ways, and you'll learn more about that in just a minute here. And I want to give you a feel for the lands that are proposed for wilderness protection. First of all, America's Red Rock Wilderness Act would protect 8.4 million acres of wilderness quality lands in Utah. Those lands are in brown, and you can see that they surround a lot of the existing national parks. Most of them are in the southeastern part of Utah, but we also have a lot of lands in the West Desert along the Nevada border there that need protection. And those are not as frequently visited, but they're equally as amazing lands, and we want to protect those too. And through the years, by putting this bill in Congress, we protect almost 1 million acres of land as wilderness. And we have lost some, but it's been a very small fraction. So the purpose of the Red Rock Wilderness Act, even if it doesn't pass as a whole, is to kind of set the gold standard for what should be protected in these areas. This comes from years of citizen surveys. Citizens have gone out there, photographed, documented, drawn on maps. Now we have people that do GIS mapping. It's a lot easier to really know what's out there that has important wilderness characteristics. And recently, the work has gotten more involved with the cultural resources of the tribes of the area. Bears Ears was really important in terms of developing stronger relationships with all the tribes of the area, and being more aware of their perspectives in the areas that are important to them. So we do have proposed wilderness in Bears Ears. You can see it in the lower right-hand corner. So Bears Ears, as you may know, got restored after President Trump reduced it by about 80% of its original size, as designated by President Obama. So we were really glad that President Biden, not long after taking office, restored it not only to its original boundaries, but added some new area as well. And that was an opportunity for all of us to learn about working with Indigenous people and the values that they hold for protecting these lands. So there are some important species that are important to California as well as Utah. The California condor has key critical habitat in both California and Utah. And I'll show you a map here. The Vermilion Cliffs in Utah. It's one area where you can see condor. And the Mexican spotted owl has a lot of critical areas within Bureau of Land Management lands in Utah that are proposed for wilderness. And here's a map of some of those areas. So Audubon has recognized a large area of the Canyonlands area, which includes Canyonlands National Park, Glen Canyon National Recreation Area, some wilderness area, the Mount-Monticello National Forest. This has confirmed about 200 species of birds. And because of the river environments provided by the Green River and the Colorado River, you have a lot of diversity of bird life along in the riparian areas. So there really are areas of the Canyonlands just teeming with life because of the water. There are a lot of areas that are a lot drier and may not have as much diversity, but even in the pinyon pine, there's a lot of there's species that are of interest, such as the pinyon jay and Say's phoebes and some others. So I think we have somebody who is involved with 30 by 30 on this call. Is that right? No, okay. Are you all familiar with 30 by 30? I would think that as Audubon members, you've probably heard that at least once. But it's the initiative that was developed out of a global international group of scientists who stated alongside the Paris Accords for the climate that yes, that's important, but if we don't also protect our lands and waters, it's going to be difficult to make progress on climate change. There's a lot of focus on dealing with energy and climate change, but scientists got together and proposed this 30 by 30 initiative to draw attention to the need, what they called a global New Deal for nature. And this comes out of Edward O. Wilson's work, the great biodiversity advocate and scientist who was proposing before he died this year to save 50% of nature by 2050. And so 30 by 30 makes the idea of protecting lands in their natural state more palatable to the politicians that have to make policies and pass administrative actions in some cases to protect nature. And so President Biden took this on early in his administration as the America the Beautiful initiative. And it has inspired a lot of good work. California is a leader, being the first state in the US to have an executive action to adopt the goals of 30 by 30 for the state. So that's pretty exciting. I think we'll learn a lot from California, both for work nationally and in local areas as well. And one thing that we're doing right now is working on getting the Interior Secretary, Deb Haaland, to reassert the authority of the BLM to designate wilderness areas. That was something that the Bush administration unfortunately took away. And it's about 30 million acres in the West that could be potentially designated and better protected. So that's an example of an administrative action that can have a really big impact on achieving this goal of 30 by 30. And the contribution of the lands in the Red Rock Wilderness Act would be 1.5% of all the land that needs to be conserved to reach 30 by 30. Which is pretty significant. So currently we have only about 13% of land protected in its natural state. So we have a long ways to go for the 2030 target. And just as important as an area, or if not more, is the landscape connectivity that these lands provide. You'll see on the map in the lower left there, the Western Wild Way. And this is an area that extends all the way from Alaska down to Mexico. And this is a major wildlife migration corridor. And is really important as we have a changing climate to allow plants, animals, ecosystems to adapt. And this shows some of the ecoregions that are within the Western Wildway, including some in California, as you can see there. And one is the Colorado Plateau, and then also the Great Basin shared with California. Those are areas within America's Red Rock Wilderness, as well as the heart of the West. So there's that one goes up to Yellowstone. So there's a lot of wildlife migration and linkages in this wildway, and Utah contains several of them, and they need to be kept intact. Michael Soule, a conservation biologist, says this is the healthiest, most intact country in the West. The central Colorado Plateau is by and large a connected set of roadless areas that completes a landscape linkage to the wildlands to the north, south, and east. So here's kind of a close-up of some of the wildlife corridors that would benefit specifically from the passage of America's Red Rock Wilderness Act. Climate refugia are areas that are kind of a safe haven for wildlife in a changing climate, that allow them to adapt, and there are a lot of them in the Red Rock Wilderness Act. Every time there's a road or a new exploration drilling program on public lands, you fragment the habitat, and the impacts can be devastating in terms of wildlife being able to use those areas for refugia. And this summarizes the reductions of greenhouse gases from protecting these lands, keeping the carbon, the fossil fuels in the ground through ARWA would be 5.7% of the carbon budget needed to keep global temperatures from rising more than 1.5 Celsius. Looks like we're more headed towards 2 degrees Celsius, unfortunately, according to what scientists are saying. These lands also store carbon in the ground. You may think of old growth forest as some of the best places for storing carbon, and they are amazing and very efficient at storing carbon. But the high desert vegetation have very deep root systems. And so they might not have as much above ground as you can see in an old growth forest, but there are extensive root networks that store carbon. So if we were to leave these lands intact, that it would be 247 million metric tons of carbon that we would be saving, plus an increase of 10% by 2100. Another effect of not protecting these lands is that there's a lot of dust that comes from off-road vehicle use, mining, drilling. The cryptobiotic crusts are destroyed. They take a long time to rebuild. Once those crusts are destroyed, you have a lot of dust coming and blowing great distances. So on the peaks of Colorado, for example, the dust on the snow will cause an earlier runoff. and that has reduced flows in the Colorado River. So what you can do is to support America's Red Rock Wilderness Act. You are going to learn more about that in just a second here. We're going to show the film. I would invite you to join a meeting with me and others to thank Representative Matsu for co-sponsoring America's Red Rock Wilderness Act. I know she's up for re-election and she's got a new district, and I don't completely understand the boundaries of it, but it's always good to thank our members of Congress for their standing up for these lands and for their continued support. We don't want to ever take them for granted. So go ahead and I think we can. Ken, can you go ahead and turn the video on?
Yeah, can you put that link in the chat and then I'll cut and paste it in YouTube?
Oh, okay. Okay. Let me see. I can go back here. Huh.
You might have to end.
Just a second. Shoot. Just about got it here. I'm putting it in the chat right now. Uh-oh. Darn it.
Is it,
there we go.
Is it the one from Heather?
From Heather.
Heather Minsk? Minsk? Okay,
I don't think so. I don't think so. Here we go. There you go.
Okay, so thank you for your patience. We were having some difficulty with it sharing the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share, we're sharing the audio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump up my audio. It might not be perfectly synced, but bear with that. And let's see if we can share my screen this way. Okay, so you should be able to see that. Do you see it now?
Yep. There we go.
And it's a friendly place once you get over the stunning space and silence and the mountains that are out there on the horizon at 100 miles away. And then all of a sudden you do start to see life. You see lizards skittering off under a rock. You hear a flock of pinion jays collecting nuts out of those pinion groves. And a raven flies by. And then with a little luck, a canyon wren, the glissade of a canyon wren's call, the sort of theme song of the canyon country, a musical waterfall that brings you up short and you just stop and listen. The sculptural forms of slick rock, just the texture, the light, the combination of stone and sky and twisted juniper with an occasional river running through, it's just a landscape that speaks to me.
Wilderness helps people remember their humanity and their sense of who they are, a planet that they're floating on in the middle of the universe under the stars. I think the ability to hear yourself in the wilderness is something special that you don't get anywhere else, where if it's not your own thoughts, your own breathing, it's the environment around you. There's a strong sense of stewardship that I feel a lot of Latinx people have about our environment, whether they're in the urban environment or whether they spend time in public lands. It's something that unites all of us.
Wildland wilderness is very important to the Navajo people because it represents who they are, their way of life, their education, and their language, and their direct connection to sacred sites, the canyons, the valleys, the mountains. That's all a part of their religion when they say, that's what embodies the entire wilderness concept. There are lots and lots of animals, bears, snakes, spiders. They are the brothers and sisters of mankind. And we speak for them. And in a lot of ways, they take care of the land, Mother Earth, every day.
I keep saying the word extraordinary because it's hard to describe this landscape if you haven't seen it, but there's nothing else like it on planet Earth.
Utah's ground zero for the fight around public lands and what does it mean to have public lands and what does that mean for our communities and our nation. We're lucky in Utah that we have huge landscapes that we can go in and find solitude. Our public lands here in Utah, if you're from New York City, they're yours. If you're from Boston, they're yours. If you're from Los Angeles, they're yours. If you're from Nephi, Utah, they're yours. And that's the great thing about wilderness and the great thing about public lands.
Utah has been a battleground over the last 35 years, mostly because the politicians that represent this state fail to actually represent the views of the people that live here. And the views are more akin to the oil and gas industry and the mining companies that make heavy contributions to their campaigns. This land is constantly under threat, and without united citizen action, it will be lost.
Some of the most serious threats for land proposed as wilderness right now are oil and gas leasing, mining, off-road vehicle usage, basically any human impact that has the potential to destroy the ecosystem. Fossil fuel development on Utah's wilderness lands also damages our planetary health by accelerating the devastating impacts of climate change. Elected officials in the state of Utah are also seeking to limit the lands available for wilderness designation by claiming that thousands of unused dirt tracks and jeep trails are actually state highways under an obscure law known as RS 2477 from the 1860s. The state of Utah is trying to seize public lands in Utah from the American people, demanding that America's public lands be turned over to state ownership and control. These short-sighted policies place short-term profits over our long-term responsibility to protect our most cherished places, the last places we should sacrifice.
Their main objective is energy development, and I think it goes further than that. Most of our county commissioners are states' rights activists, and they are in favor of removing any federal government control, and they want the state and the county to control all the policies and all the laws pertaining to mineral extraction.
In addition to facing so many threats from climate change, we're also a region that's contributing to climate change because a lot of public lands are being set aside for energy development. If we want to think about climate change seriously, I think it also pushes us to rethink how we manage public lands and think about how we can protect more places rather than prioritize them for fossil fuel extraction.
Coming home from Iraq, it took me a couple of years to find my way outside. And when I found my way outside and on our public lands, things started to click for me in a way that they hadn't before, both from a sense of healing as well as recognizing what, at least nominally, I fought for.
There's got to be some places where they're left alone, be free from industrial energy development. And Bears Ears region is one of the last remaining pristine wilderness area that must be protected.
In order to protect these lands, citizens in Utah formulated America's Red Rock Wilderness Act. This legislation, which is currently before Congress, will protect over 9 million acres of public land in Utah. It will protect the wildlife, water, and air. It would also preserve the remains of Native American cultures that have been here for thousands of years. America's Red Rock Wilderness Act will prevent oil and gas drilling, mining, and off-road vehicles from causing irreparable damage to these lands. It would also ensure that these public lands remain in public ownership, available for all of us to hike, camp, hunt, fish, or simply spend time with family and friends in wild nature.
The public lands in Utah aren't just Utahns' public lands. They belong to everyone. They belong to all Americans.
In the last 30 years, Utah politicians have time and time again tried to pass legislation through Congress that would open these lands to development. And time again, citizens from Utah banded together with Americans across the country to stop them. And so the important thing is that you have to have a mass movement with people across the country to build the political strength to stand up to the politicians of Utah.
I think first and foremost, everybody needs to know that these are their lands. And whatever happens to them, they should always have a stake in what it is. Doesn't make a difference where you live or where you come from. These are public lands. They belong to citizens of the United States.
Citizen action is crucial to the future of Utah's public lands, partly because, unfortunately, our Utah delegation has not stepped up to their responsibility to protect this land.
Decision makers respond to public pressure, and we have to show up, no matter who the person is that we've elected to office. We have to show up and tell them what we think. So it's up to us to educate them. I encourage everyone I talk to write letters to the editor. Elected officials read those, they pay attention to them, they keep track of how many support one position and how many support another.
The young generation is bringing in these new ideas of how we think about wild places and showing that we need these for our spiritual sustenance and that we love these wild places. And there's kind of this stereotype that public lands are like the old white gray hairs go. And so I think it's powerful to bring in these diverse voices. And I think that's where the real leadership will lie, because it not only shows how many people value these spaces, but also brings in new ways of thinking about how we can protect them in the long term. Young people can make a difference in the future of Utah's wildlands because the voice that young people give to wild places in Utah, the agency that they give to wild places by speaking for them, is really what's going to lead to protective designations in unprotected wild spaces in Utah. Having a restaurant here on the edge of wilderness, I'm in contact every year with thousands of people who have just come out of public lands. And what I hear again and again from them is that wilderness fixes something in them. They long for it, they need it, and then to have the experience of being in it and not to be surrounded by other people, they get to fix something in their hearts. And so it's incredibly important that everyone, all of us who care about wild places, that we get involved, that we speak up for what we love.
Festival weekend, and it reminded me of what they say in Mexico when a baby's born, dar la luz, to give to the light. And that's what it felt like coming out of that sound. I came into the light.
It is very important for people from all walks of life to come together and stand up and say enough is enough. This is our home. And if we don't say no, if we don't speak up, we're going to destroy our home. We are so, so lucky to live on this earth, Mother Earth. We have the beautiful landscapes, the sky, the sunlight, and we have young children, many, many generations to come. And we cannot afford to just stand by and allow people to destroy our environment. That's the reason why we should all stand together. There is no distinction of nationality. We're all the children of Mother Earth, and we must protect her.
Okay, thank you.
It worked.
So it'd be nice to open it up for just a minute and share our responses to what we saw on that video. Have any of you been to Utah and any familiar landscapes there?
I've been to Bryce. It was absolutely stunning in October, I think it was, and all the aspen were turning yellow.
That's a perfect time to visit Utah, for sure. Anyone else?
Yeah, like Mary, I've been to both Bryce and Zion in the fall, and it was beautiful, just beautiful. Yep.
Yeah, I've been to almost all of the national parks in Utah, and it's just a fantastic state. I have a question, though, for you. This act, the American Red Rock Wilderness Act, where is it in, and what is the progress with that, with the federal government?
Yeah, so currently it is in both the House and the Senate. And we have 88, might have added just a couple more from New Mexico. I think it's 80, might be 89 or 90 by now. Co-sponsors in the House and 19 co-sponsors in the Senate. We want to increase the number of co-sponsors in both the House and the Senate. And the reason we want to do that is because it helps hold the line against some of the bad bills that come mostly from the Utah delegation, but there are other ones as well. There are sometimes when there's an opportunity to negotiate for increasing the public land wilderness areas in Utah through an omnibus bill. So an example of that was in 2019, there was the John Dingell Public Lands Management Act, and we were able to get over 500,000 acres along the Green River and in the San Rafael Swell. which was one of the largest additions to wilderness nationally in a long time. And that was because we had so much support in the House and the Senate for this bill. And we had people willing to negotiate who were on key committees. So we're not expecting for the bill to pass as a whole. That would be great if it did, but probably not, but we are able to pull off little pieces of it and attach it to other bills. And that's happened quite a number of times over the past decade. And the Utah delegation pays a lot of attention to county politicians, county level politicians. However, interesting little turn in San Juan County, which used to be, predominantly well-established white men, mostly Mormon, who were on the county council in San Juan County. And due to some organizing that happened to get more Navajo people signed up to vote, it's now majority Navajo council. And so they support Bears Airs. The previous council didn't, but it didn't really change the Utah delegation's mind. So they say we just do what the locals tell us. And then around Moab, and there's a lot of interest by the county governments and the City of Moab to get wilderness protection, to clarify in part, what appropriate uses of different lands in the area should be, because it's just being overrun in many ways right now by off-road vehicles, and there's just a lot of recreation pressure. And so there's a real value for everyone to clarify the status of the lands. And, that's what happened along the Green River, for example, where river guides wanted to know where they can put in and what, for them, it was a practical business decision. And others wanted to protect the areas for the habitat and to have intact wilderness areas. So we're not saying we're going to, not going to do anything until we get the whole enchilada, but we are very open to negotiating along the way and building. That's why we need national support. And we also have a lot of work going on the ground in Utah. We have several staff who are working just in areas of Utah, one in the Salt Lake area. We have a Latinx coordinator that we're hiring. The first one just went on to be the public lands director of the Green Latinos organization. And then we have someone working on the Mormon community. And and he's doing a lot of really creative work. So this is a long-term effort, and we know that. And so we're willing to take the long view and to build the support at the ground level in Utah, as well as to build the national support that we need to prevent some of these bad bills from going through Congress. And also there are just people all over the US who love this place and who go here to visit every year. So Oregon and Washington, there's a lot of folks I work with who visit there. California is the same. People make like an annual pilgrimage to some part of Utah. It just really has a real a pull for many people.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So to conclude here, because it looks like we're getting close to our time, I just want to invite you to participate in a meeting with your member of Congress to thank her for her co-sponsorship of America's Red Rock Wilderness Act. Doesn't take too much time, about 30 minutes for the meeting and a 30-minute preparation. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. We have everything mapped out. You know, you don't have to do a lot of research on your own. We have everything kind of set up. And it's important during this time when we haven't been able to meet with members of Congress directly, which we usually do. We have advocates come out every spring and advocate for these lands. And it's really hard sometimes to get their attention when you can't meet face to face. And so that's something I want to offer. And there's a lot of other ways to make a difference. If you like to get out and enjoy these lands and you want to make a positive contribution, we have a stewardship program where you can actually help do things that the BLM should be doing, but maybe doesn't have the capacity to do, to protect areas that might be subject to off-road vehicle use or dispersed camping. There's some new wilderness areas that I mentioned that haven't had any work done. They need some signage, and so those are free opportunities. You just go for a weekend or a week, and they provide you at least one meal a day, and you're able to meet others who care about the land and learn something, and also make a positive contribution. And it really helps with the relationship with the Bureau of Land Management. You know, they don't see us just as the group that, you know, issues lawsuits, which we do. We have a strong legal team, and they're necessary, but it's also good to have a positive way to connect with the agency and be of service to them. And that's built up a lot of trust over this past several years that we've been doing this. So I urge you to go to our website, www.SUWA.org, and there's lots of places you can find on that website for taking action. And also, if you have your cell phone handy, we have a phone to or text to action. Here, I'll share. I think I'm sharing. Am I sharing this? No, I'm not sharing it. I'm sharing it in a different way. I want to make sure that if you have a cell phone, you put this in your cell phone. You don't get. You're not going to get inundated. We never inundate people with lots of messages, like happens with many groups. So when a vote comes up, etc., we'll let you know. And anyway, it's ARRWA to 52886. So if you have a moment to do that on your phone, we would really appreciate that. And it's a good way to know when there's something important coming up. So any further questions, or is there anyone who would be really interested in visiting with their member of Congress to say thank you for their support of the Red Rock Wilderness Act? Maybe that could go out in an email. If you have an email that goes out monthly, maybe that could be put in there. I could send somebody a little blurb, and you could see if there's any interest.
Jenny, I think you have the wrong congressperson for our area, because we are mostly represented by Doug Maltha, who is a very staunch conservative Republican. And I'm sure that he would not be receptive to our requests.
No, you're absolutely right. I would agree with you. I wasn't quite sure what the boundaries were. I knew that she had some area of your that your chapter might cover, but I wasn't sure exactly what areas.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in her district? Doesn't sound like many of you are there.
Oh, we can still send Doug, notes. Hopefully, he'll listen to other people also. So, because we are his constituents.
And how does redistricting affect you?
We're still
Oh.
stuck with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Isn't part of Sacramento going to be with Matsu? Isn't that?
Yeah,
Isn't there a
we're pretty
portion?
far north. Yeah, we're pretty far north.
North
know,
and
we-
east.
Okay.
Just south of where we are, we go all the way to the Oregon border. So Oregon and Nevada. That's it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess I was thinking Sacramento proper, but you're more north of
Right.
Sacramento. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, well, never hurts to show your support. We probably won't have a meeting with Maltha. I don't think it's going to be too productive, but there's plenty of other ways you can help. And there's a lot of plans, land use plan, or BLM, what they call travel management plans, a whole bunch of them coming up this year because of one of SUWA's lawsuits. And you can put in a public comment. That's always, that's going to be really important this year. So even if it's brief, just having a large number of those comments to say, you know, this old cattle trail, it's not a public highway, let's not create a road there. That's kind of the big issue right now, besides the legislation. And that's something anybody can comment on. So, Wei?
So Jenny, by texting these letters to this number, we will be notified about those kinds of plans or legislation, anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's usually about once a month, so it's not too onerous, but anyway.
Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for
Thank you.
the opportunity to be with you tonight. And thank you for all that you do to protect habitats and birds in California and beyond. It's really important work. And I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you. And, you know, another note for those that want to attend Pamela's and Skip's trip, you have to register. So look for the registration there, and I'll stop the recording